on missing. On panel with me is Hazra Hakim, Katosha Davis, and Mohangi Eddie. Mohangi will hold time, and Emiliano will be debating in the affirmative, while Kashaka will be debating in the negative. Good luck to everyone. With that said, first speaker, here.
I'd like to confirm if I'm audible.
You are audible.
Okay, let me just set my timer to 4 minutes. 4 minutes still, right?
Yes, please. Speaking time is 4 minutes.
Okay, sure. So I'll start in. So wait. Let's get my notes together. Okay, I'll start in 3, 2, 1. Chair, in many developing states, the problem is that the governments do not have laws, right? Let me just restart. I made a mistake. Shit. My timer went off. Let me just reset it. Shit. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Chair, the problem in many developing states is not that the government don't have laws, right? The issue is that the person who makes the laws or the person sitting in the capital city barely has any idea what is happening in the rural areas or what is happening with the money they're giving to implement the policies, right? So you find that we have situations whereby the government gives money to the ministries give money to different local councils, and at the end of the day, the people claim that the projects have been done, yet things have not been done. So when we have the Balaam effect changes the structure, right? So this Balaam effect, what it does, it makes checking of this institution or the work done by this institution, it makes it unpredictable, it makes it personal, and it makes it visible, because InfoSlide tells us that we go the Balaam effect, where you have ministers coming up with media and all that, and monitoring what has been done and directly holding them accountable. So I believe the central question in this debate, therefore, would lie: should then the high-level political authority increasingly leave the capital and directly observe, verify, and enforce what happens at the front line of government? We believe that the rise of the Balaam effect is something we don't regret. So, Chair, one thing you have to understand, the features in the rise of the Balaam effect, we have things like unannounced inspections, direct observations, physical verification, and then high-level visibility. We have public accountability, and then immediate enforcement where wrongdoing is found. We believe this is very okay and is very profound for our economy. We actually prioritize this because direct executive monitoring of frontline performance should actually happen. So we have things like ministers then increasingly conducting surprise inspections, where they physically come to schools and verify staff and beneficiaries or of government programs. They go ahead and compare records of what's there against the reality on ground, and then we have immediately they carry out investigations where they see loopholes there. So we believe this is, first of all, going to hold accountability so high. That's one thing. That's the impact of this. So you have to look at status quo, right? So first of all, status quo, we have money and funds being dispersed from the ministry coming down to the very frontline workers. But then we have issue is that the people who are supposed to be the watchdogs of the ministry, of the government, they don't go ahead and monitor what's happening. And even the very people who monitor the distribution of the funds are the very people who benefit from pretending that actually everything is working out well. So we have information asymmetry, where the central government does not know what actually happens down there. And the principal agent is that the people who are supposed to let them know what's happening is that they don't happen. This is reality in Uganda and in many developing countries, right? So why the Balaam effect is then different? Because these guys then go ahead and directly come and monitor what's happening and check and solve the problem, right? So we believe this is actually the better thing, right? So first of all, we believe that the arguments we're going to run is that we believe the Balaam effect improves public sector performance because it changes the incentives of public servants who otherwise have limited reason to fear detection. So when we have the rise of the Balaam effect, we have more government ministers, more government officials coming down to go ahead and check government activities, right? That looks like if a government has released certain money for certain roads to work on certain projects, we have more ministers coming up to go ahead and check. We have more accountability being actually carried out, right? So, Chair, we realize why this is true. You find that most times when government provides services, people don't go ahead and follow. And because of the Balaam effect, when they find things are not done, we actually go ahead and punish the people directly. And then we now have deterrence. Why is deterrence happening on our side of the house, right? Deterrence doesn't happen because of, let's say, just getting these people. And the deterrence happens because the punishments are credible, right? For example, a thief does not need to know that the police are watching them like at every street, right? They only need to believe that there's a meaningful chance of them being caught. So when you have the Balam effect, we create an incentive that the people are in the offices will actually have that, know what, if I do this, there's a chance that I'll be caught because ministers will come here unknown, uncalled for, unexpected, and they'll find this happening. So then deterrence is happening because people then believe that there's a chance of them
Thank you,
being caught,
Speaker.
and then we have more happening. The other speakers will run other arguments like to
Thank you,
submit.
Speaker. Your time is up. Cross-examination is open. However, I encourage you to pass mute and make it so much engaging. We shall be adding in 30 seconds in case of network issues to allow you to respond and unmuting process. Cross-examination is now open.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. Speaker, does corruption also happen in centralized government?
Pardon?
Does corruption or bigger corruption happen in a centralized government?
I think by the extent to which that corruption happens can be capped because of the little remittance that will be taken to the local levels. When little money is taken, you then realize that this money has not been corrupt. Then government will actually go ahead and check its own top staff.
Okay. Are you aware that with the rise of the Balaam effect, some innocent civil servants can actually be arrested, but they have no way of proving themselves right?
I think when the money has been sent to a local government to do certain work, let's say construct a road, and then the road is not constructed, we believe everyone in that local government then should be able to answer why is the road not constructed. The people who are innocent will be let go, and then the ones who are guilty for that will actually be arrested, and it will enforce accountability.
Okay. Do you think that the Balaam effect checks only the civil servants that cannot actually defend themselves, or it goes ahead and also perhaps checks those big people in big positions?
Thank you, Speaker. Your time is up. We shall just go on with the first opposition speech. First speaker, opposition.
Okay, I begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. So I think in the first place, we need to make clarity with motion. I think as side opposition, we do not think that the Balaam effect has so much negative impact and we should do away with that. No, I think the rise has a much more problematic part. Right? I think the Balaam effect in the first place, the Balaam effect does something that is so humiliating. How this happens that then it includes grabbing of people, embarrassment, and whatever. Remember, this Balaam effect also includes social media putting these things online and people are able to view. What happens that then these public civil servants then lose public trust. What happens with that? It means that people won't again trust these people. For example, maybe this Balaam effect has happened in a school and they have done abrupt checking, right? It means that social media will take these things online and people are able to view. What happens is that this school will lose people to buy into it. It means the buy-in idea will people will not buy into this idea of this specific school because it only has one teacher that has not done the right thing as government tells them. It means that it affects a large number of people. How? Remember, it also affects the student who's in this specific school. It means the student is unable to study a particular subject because their teacher maybe has been imprisoned because of because of the abrupt checking and wanting accountability. I think then in the first place, we should analyze that we are talking to countries like Uganda, right? In the first place, we think Uganda gets its money from aid and its finances, right? So it means that in the first place, people that receive this money are mainly that is the central government. When the central government receives this money, obviously, it means there's a process that it has to go through until it reaches this local chairperson one that is done that uses this money or distributes this money among citizens. So what happens that money from the central government, when it's going to reach people through PDM, it means that it like a lot of embezzlement happens, because from central government then to ministers then to individuals in offices, it means that there's a lot of embezzlement. But what the Balaam effect does, it's only affecting people in only small offices. It's only affecting the LOC one chairperson who's in a specific village, XY village. It means that that is not like solving corruption, because still even if they send 5 billion for a road to be constructed, at the end of the day, on maybe the LOC one chairperson only get like 10 million to construct a road. What happens with that is that then the Balaam effect is unable to check ministers, is unable to check those people in central government. It only looks at only local governments. I think that is unfair and it causes inequality, because still it is not their fault to receive less money. And according to the files that Balaam has, maybe they are supposed to receive like 90 billion, which they didn't receive. I think then secondly, because that the rise looks like humiliation, it means that every state minister is going to do this sort of thing. Every minister is going to check their civil servants, like abruptly, everything's going to happen. They're going to achieve accountability. That is so true. But the problematic part with accountability is that then it's going to cause humiliation. What humiliation does, it means they're going to lose public trust and buy in. When civil servants lose public trust and buy-in, is that then their projects are not going to go through, or even so they will not like again get people like to support them. This means that if I've been maybe an LOC 5 chairperson, I'm no longer going to contest to be an LOC 5 chairperson. I need, okay, side proposition is to justify to us how these interdicted leaders, or how the imprisonment of these specific leaders is then going to help to reform these specific individuals. Because I think the Balaam effect, or the rise of the Balaam effect, should be able to solve corruption, right? As in status quo. But for us, we think it doesn't solve corruption, but unless it only gives people with a lot of money, it only gives people with privilege to escape these sort of crimes. Because ministers are not checked there themselves. It means even if they are checked and they are found guilty, they have the capability to escape those crimes, because they have that sort of money, they have the connections into government. It means that me, who's an LOC one chairperson, I have to suffer the consequences that come with that. Side proposition thinks that this is a deterrence, and it's also true, it is a deterrence. But to us, we think that the rise it itself, it is the problem part. I think the Balaam effect is okay. Checking people abruptly is okay, we can have accountability, but then what the rise does, that it affects a lot of people, and it affects like a number of people in that sort of way. What happens that with the Balaam effect, the deterrence mechanism already exists, and people are able to learn not to do those specific crimes. But with the rise, is that it affects public trust. When public trust is affected, it means these leaders no longer have capability to do specific things. I think then we need to understand what happens in status quo, right? There's distribution of money from the central government to the local government, and then to be used, right? For example, the PDM. What happens with that is that then it's not directly
Speaker,
given to
time.
these
Speaker, your time. First examination.
Okay, I begin the cross-examination in 3, 2, 1. Speaker, I would like you to help us elaborate for a deterrence mechanism to be effective. What is a prerequisite needed for it?
For deterrence mechanism to be effective, I think people should be punished for the specific law, for specific wrongs that they do.
Okay, very good. In what way do you promote accountability on your side of the house?
Because the Balaam effect still exists.
Okay, great. Without the rise, what would happen?
What would happen? Deterrence would still happen, because people are able to see examples, and without the rise, people wouldn't be humiliated.
But you recognize that without the rise, there would be no need to actually involve so much social media and so much, invoke so much enforcement in terms of punishment, right?
I told you that the rise looks like every minister, whether the
Thank you,
minister
Speaker.
of transport.
Cross-examination is done.
Thank you.
Okay, we shall now move on to the second speech from the team affirmative.
Hello, everyone. Am I audible?
You are.
Okay. Now, it's important to understand that the Balaam effect is a concept where we are simply going to pick out the corrupt officials from probably the grassroots, just like I've said, but then we send them to investigative authorities, other investigative authorities like courts of law, like police, and many others to gather more information and finally convict them. If it's definitely true that they committed that crime, they will be convicted and actually punished and all that. Now, to rebuttals, they come and talk about arresting of innocent people. How will clearly show them that arrest is actually for arrest is for the purpose of sort of carrying out investigations and then probably finding out who is exactly guilty. If we arrest you and carry out investigations on you and we find out that you're actually not guilty, you're innocent, we let you go. We let you go back to your place of teaching and all that. You work. The one who is actually guilty is picked out. They come and talk about embarrassment. We think legitimate embarrassment is not equivalent to citizens suffering from dysfunctional institutions. We actually believe if we are to embarrass you for the purpose of streamlining institutions, it's well and good. Because at the end of the day, you're the one who has caused the embarrassment to yourself by sort of stealing state funds, by sort of having wrong records of account, by sort of registering high numbers of students, yet you have actually low numbers of students and all that. They talk about it being discriminative and all that, and they say probably it only caters at people in low offices and all that. We actually think since the Balaam effect is just on its rise, it can be upgraded. We can probably with time it can be upgraded to sort of arresting ministers, arresting all that they're actually talking about. But equally, it's important if Pano, you don't buy me on that argument, buy me on this one. It is important to understand that the impact of corruption does not discriminate on the level of office. We think every kind of corruption that occurs should actually be tamed. What they're trying to say under this is that the Balaam effect is sort of bad, it should be condemned and all that, simply because it focuses on people in offices and all that. But we think even them, as long as they actually commit corruption, we should actually hold them accountable, and that is what we are doing. And we think from the grassroots, if we hold these other grassroots accountable, we shall be able to trace for those who are in high offices and actually pushing for this sort of corruption. I mean, there are multiple cases outside this. If you're to look at probably legal sort of cases in courts of law where like they picked actual murderers and then the partial murderers, people who killed on ground, and they later picked out the master planners. Now we are looking at things like accountability. We think public officials should be answerable for the actions they actually commit, and this is more likely to occur under this effect because we prevent preparation of false reports. By the time we endorse this and actually carry out a random check, you do not have time to prepare a sort of false efforts, maybe adding up this and that to make sure that your reality matches with what is on paper. And officials are actually going to maintain standards, and this is actually more likely to happen since the minister is on ground, or since the supervisory bodies are on ground to sort of find the grassroots information that affects the common people. We also look at continuous compliance. If they know that we are going to carry out inspections on a given date, on the other date, it means that the compliance is only going to happen on that very day. Now, when we carry out inspections on different dates, unknown dates, it means at the end of the day, we are going to have this sort of compliance continuing. We also look at bridging the
Thank
gap
you,
between
Speaker.
paperwork and
Time
actually.
is up.
But finally, we look at the
We have
interest of
crossed into
stakeholders.
cross-examination.
I begin cross examination in 3, 2, 1. So what does the rise of the Balaam effect look like?
Pardon your question, I can't get you.
What does the rise of the Balaam effect look like?
It looks like having random checks in places of public service like schools and all that. It looks like executive members themselves going on ground to carry out things like accounting and all that that would have been done by other people, like maybe school inspectors
So
and all that.
what does the
It's
Balaam effect
executive
look
oversight.
like?
I've answered you. It's sort of executive oversight.
So there's nothing like the rise of the Balaam effect and the Balaam effect, they don't differ.
I've clearly showed you that the rise is this happening.
Okay, thank you for that. So what incentive is there to prove that the Balaam effect is also going to affect ministers in the central
I think
government?
the incentive is the
The
interest of
speaker's
stakeholders.
time for
The minister
cross-examination is done.
and the public services
Thank
and
you,
proper use of.
speakers. Time for cross-examination is done. We shall now move on to the second substantive speech from the opposition team.
I begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Chair, the bottom effect simply looks like when it rises, it simply looks like all ministers, or simply all ministers, or each and every minister could want to actually carry out unannounced inspections in their own sector. This is to say, for example, if it is the Minister of Health, they're going to make unannounced inspections in the Ministry of Health. Same applies to the Minister of Transport, same applies to the Minister of Finance and every other thing. Now, what happens, what is the impact on that, or why that becomes very bad, is that firstly, people tend to now lose their focus, or even people tend to they paint a very bad picture of the local governments and tend to lose focus on these local government on these central governments. This is to say, when you continuously or consistently inspect only local governments and your ministers, it simply drives people's focus, it simply drives people's minds away from the central government, because you have proven yourselves good and you trust, and people now simply change their attention to like the local government and think that local governments are the people who actually carry out corruption alone, which is very wrong. We think that for someone to like carry out that kind of inspection, they should firstly begin from themselves. This is to say, if it is carrying out inspections and there it is the Balaam effect, it should be better if it could be carried out with the ministers themselves or beginning with the central government. But even that aside, what we get from opposition, team proposition says that what they're doing is trying to improve public sector performance. This is to say, when they carry out abrupt inspections, they are going to like do continuous compliance of these civil servants. We think that this is actually true, it can happen, but on the other side, we think they're laying another ground of people actually being corrupt. This is to say, actually, when people tend to know that actually they are going to carry out abrupt inspections, they're going to now start bribing the head teachers themselves. If they are teachers, they come, hey, I'm not going to be around tomorrow. So if at all anything happens, like an inspections, please bear that for me. And now what happens is that now the impact of the rise of bottom effects does not now actually do what? Doesn't bring out the very best outcomes. But secondly, we think that bottom effect is good, but the problem is the rise of the bottom effect. The rise of Baram effect comes about with the embarrassment. This is to say, people are posted on social media, people are like embarrassed very, very badly. And now why is that bad? Firstly, is that people tend to lose trust in these sorts of civil servants. If they are students, they tend to lose trust in their teachers. If they are patients, they tend to lose trust in their doctors. And now simply that very means that actually people are not going to comply to what these people are saying. This is another impact now goes on to the civil servants themselves. People actually failed on even trying out on local government staffs because they know they have a lot of check-ins, they have a lot of inspections, they deter them from actually doing those local government stuff. But also, we think that on our side of a house, we achieve a lot of outcomes because firstly, we think we are doing
we are doing it with a balance effect. We are doing it with a balance effect, but not on a rise. And we think this is going to very well work because, firstly, we don't have a lot of inspections happening. We think what we are doing, we are keeping people's focus, firstly, on the local government, but also on the central government. We are not driving people's focus from the central government much more to the local government because we think when the rise of balance effects happen, people tend to like lose their focus from the central government to now the local government. They tend to think that the local government is the only part of a country that could have corrupt officials, and yet corrupt officials occur on both sides, and yet corrupt officials actually firstly come from the central government. They actually answer the question and think that when they first deal with the local government, the central government could actually be got at the end of the day. That is very wrong or impractical. At the end of the day, what happens is that if you arrest these local government officials who are corrupt, central government officials will continue with the corruption because either way they're the first people to receive the
Thank you,
monies,
Speaker.
the first people
Time
who
is
send
up.
out those monies, and we think the corruption in hand of itself begins with those.
So we shall open cross-examination.
I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. Okay, Speaker. You go ahead and say that people are going to get ashamed. Do you want corrupt people to be pampered?
Sorry?
Do you want the corrupt people to be pampered and given like those simple punishments and all that?
I want a balance on corrupt people.
No, okay, but like, let me ask you a question. The people who are going to be arrested and have been proven to be corrupt and then they're put on social media and all that, is it okay? Is it you don't want them to be ashamed and all that, right? That's the reason why you don't support the rise in the Balaam effect.
Yeah.
Because you don't want them to be ashamed. So you want
Yeah.
a thief, someone who has stolen 700 million to construct a hospital to help
Embarrassment
people.
simply makes people lose trust in them, and that is very bad.
So you would rather trust someone who has stolen money to buy you pads or get you shoes to go to school?
Pardon?
You want to continue trusting someone who has stolen money to buy girls' pads, to buy you shoes, to take you to school, to buy you chalk in schools?
Thank you,
That's
Speaker.
your
That
point.
marks the end of cross-examination. We shall now move on to the third substantive speech from the team in the affirmative.
Okay.
Okay, I would like to confirm audibility with the chair. Am I audible? Okay. I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Chair, I think one thing that we largely need to understand into this debate is what was provided for us, first of all, by the info slide, right? The info slide in the last segment clearly shows us that there's going to be the use of coordination between the state security and the anti-corruption units. Now, mind you, these are units that do not just check only the local government, right? These are units that also go ahead to check the central governments. These are the units that actually went ahead to go and check through the speaker's saga that was happening over right here in terms of like the whole scenario of the whole money scandals that were happening. This was done through the state corruption units and other anti-corruption units that are within the government itself. So the argument of team opposition fronting that, oh, we will actually care more of the local governments and not the central governments is actually not going to fly in this debate. Why? Because it's still a trickle-down effect. At the end of the day, the investigations that will be made will still have to trickle down to where the money still came from, the root cause of that corruption at the end of the day, meaning we shall still actually solve the problems even within the central government in and of itself. Now, to expand more on my speech, first things first, I think we need to understand what the rise is in this kind of case. And Henry does us a very good job in first speech and clearly shows us that it involves like a high number of unannounced inspections, high number of physical verifications, the high level of visibility in terms of like social media, public accountability, and immediate referral or enforcement, right? And notice that this actually does not happen when there's just a mere Balaam effect. No, this happens when there is an increase, like when there is a rise, when there is increased social media output, right? Now, I'm going to analyze for you some of the arguments which team proposition and team opposition brought forth, right? Firstly, opposition comes and says that, oh, because of this high or the rise of the Balaam effect, we're going to have like extreme social media, like output, right, of these people who have been actually engaging in these acts of corruption, right? Now, they say that it's bad because they are going to lose trust in people and things of that sort, and they're going to lose the trust of the people in general. And it's also going to derive people from like engaging in local government works because they think it's too hard for them to do. Now, for us, we actually find that as very much efficient and very much effective on team proposition. Why? Because that will actually promote effectiveness in a sense that people will actually now be fearing. That is why I asked her in the first questioning, what a deterrence mechanism is largely made out of. What is the prerequisite? It means the prerequisite in this case is like a high level of like urgency for like the harm that happens to them, the repercussions that come with it, right? You understand that when there is a high level of this, right, there are repercussions that come with like the high level of the social media output and the social media like coverage of that, right? It makes your name gets like fumbled in society and you lose the trust, right? And that is what will actually put in you that drive to actually do what is right and not squander the money if it's given to you. That is what will promote efficiency within the local government itself, because they do not want to end up losing the trust of these individuals, because they want to go back and like engage in like the whole thing again when they are being voted back by these very individuals, right? This actually promotes efficiency more on our side and actually less on their side. Now, in terms of deterrence, we show you that the deterrence is best achieved when there is like a high level of like what like there's a high level of like marginal effect, like what happens at the end of the day, right? We show you that at the end of the day, when you actually put these things into play and like you actually have a high level of enforcement, you go ahead and like you look through these people day in, day out, and you have it done on a more thorough basis, you're actually able to promote efficiency of these individuals, but you also to deter these people from actually doing things that are actually not just, as my current speakers have currently shown you. So now that brings us to the mutually existent benefits that exist on our side, right? We show that on our side, we have a much more higher level of deterrence being brought about forth because we actually reprimand people on a larger scale, not only on a larger scale, but because we actually show them like that they have done something very, very bad, right? But two, we also show that we have improved service delivery, and we also show that the corruption reduces greatly on both the central and the local government because it's like a trickle down effect from the top. I mean, from the bottom to the top as it goes on, like helping everyone in the end of the day. And they do not show us what their side would this look like if they actually don't have like the rise happening on their side of the house. Because if it's not the rise, then what else will you do? What is going to promote that efficiency?
The
What is
House
going
would
to
like to
promote
thank the last affirmative
that
speaker
good
for that
like level of
speech. That marks the end of the government bench. We shall now listening from the third opposition speaker, some of this entire debate.
Third opposition speaker.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll begin my speech at three. One, two, and three. So, Chair, I think we need to clearly understand what this Balaam effect is in the first place. You see, what Team Prop argues is that, hey, the Balaam effect is actually working for both maybe the central government and the local government. But I feel like that is a fallacy because the Balaam effect clearly is dealing with this with the local government. Yeah, it is Balaam coming and then charging or maybe arresting an LC1, not necessarily the people in the central government. So that makes it a fallacy on itself. But then also, when we tell you that the corruption, most of the corruption or the highest level of corruption does not happen on village levels because these people actually get little funds. Yeah, corruption mostly happens at the central level, at the highest level. Yeah, because these are the people that are receiving most of the money, and by the time this money now reaches the LC1, well, it is very little because it has been consumed. Now, the reason as to why we don't agree with the rise of the Balaam effect is because it is simply because with this rise of this Balaam effect, you actually come to realize that now you are going to arrest an LC1, yeah, because you feel like maybe they have not done their duty, but then you have not questioned maybe the steps through which this money has gone through. But then also at a point in time of recent, Balaam is going to those village schools, yeah, the UPE schools where these people cannot even say anything for themselves. Well, our question is, why can't he now go to maybe a bigger school? He normally gets these people who are vulnerable because perhaps he thinks that he should paint a clear picture or a very good picture of the government, which is not true. So that is why Team Up in today's debate is simply saying that with this rise of the Balaam effect, with the embarrassment and the humiliation, you're actually going to cause a lot of people are going to lose the trust in the local government. Why that becomes bad is that you are indirectly affecting them in a way that when you fire around, or when you arrest around 100 doctors, maybe because you think they are not doing their duty, indirectly, well, people are going to fall sick, yeah, and now these people don't have anyone to treat them. Why that is bad is that now you're even affecting the receiving of the social services. But then also even the teachers, when you come and embarrass this teacher just because you feel like maybe they are not doing their duty, there are very many students that are going to lose out in that kind of regard. Now, that makes even the Balaam effect much more bad. Now, Chair, what we argue today is, hey, corruption is actually not happening on okay, it is there on the village levels, but it is mostly in the high positions, in people who are like the ministers, in those in the amongst people, the big people who are receiving this money. So it is not right for the Balaam effect now to go ahead and maybe charge the LC ones, to charge the simple head teachers in UPE schools. No, that is why we don't support the rise, because at the end of the day, you're affecting the citizens, one, because now they're not going to even receive the services, but then also two, people are going to be very scared to go ahead and maybe go for these civil serving opportunities. Now that becomes very bad and detrimental, because you're affecting now at the end of the day people at the village levels, yet they are not supposed to be affected in that kind of way. Now, Team Up also, we are not against actually the Balaam effect. What we are against is the rise of the Balaam effect. We clearly showed in our first speech how this Balaam effect is done. People come with cameras, they humiliate everyone, even when it is not necessary to do that, because sometimes perhaps people miss out on maybe doing what maybe a teacher will miss out on coming in class because they have a few or very important reasons as to why. But now what Balaam does is arrest these people without even further investigation.
Time, speaker. Okay, thank you so much for the round. So I'll move for deliberation, and yeah, good luck. Panel, to be safer, I'm going to have a WhatsApp call, so just log off and yeah, you'll join that instead.
No,